Formula One just spent billions building the future, and it might already be falling apart. In less than 3 races, the sport lost nearly half its audience in key markets, drivers are calling the cars unpredictable, and engineers are now rushing into emergency meetings to fix something that was supposed to be revolutionary. But that is not even the worst part. Because right now, on the straights, cars can suddenly lose half their power in a fraction of a second, while another car is still at full speed, closing in fast. This is not just bad racing. This is a system that may be fundamentally broken. And what is happening behind closed doors could change Formula One forever. Stay with me, because the real reason this is happening is something almost nobody saw coming. Subscribe now, because this story only gets more serious. It did not collapse overnight. That is what makes this so dangerous. Because from the outside, everything still looks normal. The cars are on track. The lights go out. The races happen. But underneath that surface, something is slowly breaking. And you can see it in the smallest details. Drivers lifting earlier than ever before. Not attacking into corners, but preparing for the next straight. Not thinking about overtaking, but thinking about energy. And that changes the DNA of Formula One. Because this sport was never about managing. It was about pushing. Every lap. Every corner. Every braking zone. But now, there is hesitation. And hesitation at 300 kilometers per hour is not just unusual. It is unnatural. And here is where things become even more uncomfortable. Because the drivers are not just adapting. They are complaining. Quietly at first. Then more openly. One of them described the cars as unpredictable. Another said it feels like something completely different from Formula One. And when multiple world champions start questioning the direction of the sport, you know this is not a minor issue. But most people still think this is just about driving feel. It is not. This goes much deeper. Because every time a driver lifts off the throttle earlier than expected, every time a car suddenly slows down on a straight, every time another car closes in faster than anticipated, you are creating a scenario that did not exist before. Speed differences that are not natural, not gradual, but sudden, sharp, and difficult to predict. And this is where everything starts connecting. Because those same moments, those unexpected changes in speed, are exactly what led to the first major warning sign. A crash that should not have happened. Not in modern Formula One. Not with all the technology. Not with all the data. And yet, it did. But here is the detail most people missed. It was not caused by driver error. It was not caused by weather. It was not even caused by mechanical failure. It was caused by the system itself. A system designed to improve racing. Creating a situation where one car behaves completely differently from another in the exact same piece of track. And that is something Formula One has spent decades trying to eliminate. But now, it is back. In a new form. More complex. Harder to detect. And much more difficult to fix. But this is where the story takes another turn. Because while all of this is happening on track, something even more alarming is happening off track. And almost nobody is talking about it. The people running the sport are starting to react. Not publicly. Not dramatically. But urgently. Meetings are being scheduled. Technical groups are being assembled. Manufacturers are being called in. And when Formula One starts moving this fast behind closed doors, it means one thing. They are running out of time. But the real question is not what they are fixing. It is what they are trying to prevent. Because if this continues, if the racing does not improve, if the risks increase, if the fans keep leaving, then this is no longer about a bad regulation. This becomes something much bigger. And what comes next is where everything starts to unravel. Because what they are trying to prevent is already starting to show. Not in headlines. Not in dramatic statements. But in behavior. Subtle changes that reveal something much bigger. Fans are watching differently. Or worse, not watching at all. And this is where everything becomes impossible to ignore. Because Formula One can survive controversy. It can survive dominance. It can even survive boring seasons. But what it cannot survive is disconnection. And that is exactly what is happening. Races no longer feel intuitive. You are not watching drivers push to the limit. You are watching systems manage themselves. Energy targets. Deployment phases. Harvest modes. And if you need to understand a spreadsheet to understand a race, something is broken. But here is where it gets even more serious. Because this is not just about entertainment. This is about identity. Formula One has always sold one core idea. The fastest drivers. In the fastest cars. Pushing harder than anyone else in the world. But now, that idea is fading. Because when cars are slower, when drivers are lifting, when overtakes depend more on battery state than skill, that identity starts to crack. And once that cracks, everything else follows. But there is one moment that exposed this more than anything else. Qualifying. The one session where nothing is supposed to be held back. Pure speed. Maximum attack. No compromises. And yet, even there, drivers were not pushing flat out. Because they could not. Because pushing meant draining the battery too early. Because one lap was no longer just about speed. It was about timing, energy, positioning. And suddenly, the fastest lap was not always the fastest car. It was the best managed lap. And fans noticed. They may not understand the technical details, but they understand when something feels wrong. When the spectacle loses clarity. When the fastest driver is not obviously the fastest. And that confusion creates distance. But this is where things take another turn. Because while fans are starting to disconnect, teams are starting to divide. Not publicly, not aggressively, but strategically. Because some teams want change, urgent change, and others do not, because they are winning. And in Formula One, if you are winning, you protect the system, even if that system is flawed. So now you have two forces pulling in opposite directions. Fix the problem, or preserve the advantage. And right in the middle of that tension is the FIA, trying to balance safety, competition, politics, and time. And time is the one thing they do not have. Because every race that passes reinforces the same pattern. Drivers adapting instead of attacking. Engineers controlling instead of unleashing. Fans questioning instead of celebrating. And here is the detail that changes everything. The fixes they are working on do not solve the core issue. They reduce the symptoms. Less extreme power differences. Faster energy recovery. Better warnings. Safer conditions. All necessary. All urgent. But none of them address the fundamental contradiction. A system that demands both maximum performance and constant limitation at the same time. And that contradiction does not disappear with adjustments. It stays underneath everything. And this is why the next race is so important. Because Miami is not just about performance. It is about perception. If fans feel improvement, the narrative stabilizes. If they do not, the narrative collapses. And once a narrative collapses, it spreads faster than any technical fix. Because people stop asking how to fix it, and start asking something much more dangerous. Was this a mistake from the beginning? And if that question takes hold, then what comes next is not just a regulation change. It is a loss of trust. And that is the hardest thing to recover. And this is where everything finally comes together. Because up to this point, you could still believe this is temporary. A rough start. An adjustment phase. Something that time will fix. But there is one problem that time cannot solve. And almost nobody is talking about it. The foundation of these rules cannot be changed. Not easily. Not quickly. And in some cases, not at all. The 50% electric split. Locked in. Long-term agreements with manufacturers. Billions already invested. Entire engine programs built around it. You cannot just walk that back. You cannot wake up one morning and say, let us go back. That door is closed. And that changes everything. Because now, Formula One is not trying to perfect a system. It is trying to survive it. And that is a completely different situation. Because when a regulation has flexibility, you evolve. When it does not, you compromise. You adapt around the problem, instead of removing it. And that is exactly what is happening. Every proposed fix is not a solution. It is a workaround. Reduce power here. Increase recovery there. Add warnings. Limit extremes. Smooth the behavior. But the core remains untouched. And that creates a dangerous illusion. From the outside, it looks like progress. Inside, they know it is containment. And this is where the real risk appears. Because containment works until it does not. Until one race exposes everything again. Until one incident reminds everyone what is underneath. Until one moment breaks the balance. And then, you are back at the same question. But with more pressure. More visibility. More consequences. And here's the part that changes how you see all of this. The sport knew. Not everything. Not every detail. But enough. There were warnings about energy management complexity. Concerns about removing the MGUH. Doubts about active aerodynamics. Signals that this could become unstable. But the momentum was too strong. The narrative was too important. A new era. Sustainability. Innovation. Relevance. Formula One needed this to work. So it moved forward. And now, it is dealing with that decision. In real time. In front of everyone. But still, quietly. Because admitting the scale of the problem would create something even bigger. Doubt. Not just in the rules. In the direction of the sport itself. And Formula One cannot afford that. Not now. Not after years of growth. Not after bringing in a new generation of fans. But that is exactly why Miami matters more than any race so far. Because Miami is not just another weekend. It is the first real attempt to prove control. To show that the situation is manageable. That the sport is still leading. Not reacting. And everything will be measured. The racing. The overtakes. The gaps. The behavior of the cars. But more importantly, the feeling. Does it feel like Formula One again? Or does it still feel like something else? Because that answer will define what happens next. If it feels right, the crisis slows down. If it does not, it accelerates. And this is the final layer of the story. Because beyond the engineering, beyond the politics, beyond the audience numbers, there is one thing that decides everything. Perception. If people believe the sport is recovering, they stay. If they feel it is losing its identity, they leave. And once they leave, they do not come back easily. So now Formula One is facing a situation it has not faced in years. Not dominance. Not controversy. Not even regulation failure. Something deeper. A test of identity. A test of trust. And a deadline that cannot be moved. Because Miami is coming. And when the lights go out there, it will not just be the start of another race. It will be the moment where everyone finally sees whether this era can be saved, or whether the collapse has already begun.